We have returned to the second half of this second class on mind as the kingdom of heaven within. We've, over the last two classes, we've taken this chart as the main chart. We moved over to these mystical utterances. So you can see how the worlds and words connect. Those are two of the elements of the sixfold system of attaining Brahman called Sadakya in Tantra. And I'd like to give a whole retreat on that sometime, just on that one subject, because it takes in the deities as a third aspect, and the mantras as a fourth aspect, and letters of alphabets as a fifth aspect. All of this, a system in Tantra that really goes deep into that path of Shabda Brahma, or God as vibration, or kind of something that we miss out on, maybe, thinking that all of this is just consciousness vibrating at different intensities, lower, middling, higher, and that when the mind is, doing the vibrating, then worlds appear, like in waking state, and when it stops vibrating, like in deep sleep, the worlds disappear. It doesn't occur to us because we're looking at it in the other way. It's that the worlds are first, and then the body comes, and then the brain, and then the thinking, and then the intelligence. Maya turns everything to look other than what it is. It's called vikshepa. And so it would be the same with words. Words would be given a treatment in Western societies, especially contemporary ones, that they're the last thing that happened, because first you had to have vocal cords, and before that you had to have a body, and before that, you had to be born, and had to have food for energy to actually utter the words, and you had to have systems that were created that used words. So the words it makes it look like words came kind of late in the game. But in the Indian systems, we're showing that the word was the first thing, and the beginning was the word. And if we were to tune into vritti, that is vibration of the mind, because there's a whole teaching and sets of charts I could use in yoga by the father of yoga, Patanjali, that treats vrittis, both positive and negative vrittis of the mind. If we were to look at it anyway through the idea of vibrations, then we'd become much more aware of this. But of course, science has looked at it more along the terms of outer vibration only. And most of the people of the world today also believe in that. The idea that objects are just thought concretized has not really gained any ground, even though Holy Mother told us this back in the early 1900s when she was in the body, and mentioned it to some of her Western disciples that came to India too. So worlds and words, two of the elements of this system that opens up Brahman for us, a recognition, pratyabhigya, of Brahman and what it consists of, like in the beginning with the word. And there must have been a word for darkness in Hebrew, and there must have been a word for light, and it's the same in Sanskrit. There were words for darkness and light, or the two paths, or darkness meaning somehow before the mind started thinking there was no vibration and there was just darkness. Then it started thinking and there was light and intelligence and so forth. So the words had to be the first things for it, not only cosmologically with the gods, but with people. So I need words to explain what I just saw, inside of me. And we know that Sanskrit is called the Deva Bhasya, the language of the gods. So they were concerned with, and most taken up with, describing Brahman in various ways. And they knew about vibration, Shabda Brahman, God is vibration. And these are paths that are long-lived and not only many thousands of years old, but actually recur again at the beginning of huge, long cycles. There's a word for that too, like kalpas and so forth, yugas. So you must have words for these things before they can be comprehended by the modern mind. So in a sense, we are starting more trying to examine these words and moving back into our consciousness. That's called involution. Like this quote here, which we'll end this chart with here, has something to say about that. In meditation, the worshipper leaves the body through the subtle nadi, gains union and abides in fire by uttering pur, and in the air by uttering bhuva, and in the sun by uttering svaha, and finally in Brahman declaring maha. He reaches the lords of sight, hearing, and speech, and understanding becomes the divine Brahman. So you could see how these sight, hearing, and speech then would go together with sun, moon, and fire, and so forth, and higher intelligence, understanding, so that pretty soon one would then just, through this inner involution process, because he says the worshipper leaves the body through the subtle nadi. That means these inner nerve, this inner sushumna and ida and pingala, which we're known about, that vibration flows along channels. In that way, you could look at a canyon with a river in it as a sort of force moving along a sort of gross nadi, a gross channel. But then you have to take that inwards and then know that these rivers that are called out-breath, in-breath, and suspended breath are also moving in and out through channels. And so, like the word nadi, or subtle nerve, is really not known to us. We could say in English subtle nerve, but then we wouldn't have anything really to understand subtle nerve, because all we know about is the gross nerves that carry blood, vessels, and so forth, and that carry food, But the five pranas, which are some of the tattvas, and which take you from waking, dreaming to deep sleep, take you from heaven to earth to hell, if you want, then those vibrations called prana are very important, those five pranas. And so there are words for them again, and they lead you to different worlds through these channels that move inward. So there could be a whole series of charts that are presented, which I've composed, that would show us that kind of thinking through the nadis. In fact, I think I brought one with me. We can look at that. This quote here from the Taittiriya Upanishad, actually both these quotes are very indicative of this process of moving in and out, whether it's the breath or whether it's consciousness, or whether it's energy like prana. And involution and evolution is based on that. And I've often said before that we don't really have the idea of involution because death puts an end to that. There's nowhere to go after the body dies. There's no soul, there's no consciousness. So when we're bereft of these great principles, we don't have any wherewithal or anywhere to go. What to speak of as a conscious transmigrating soul, but also as a way of understanding how the worlds came into being through words, through vibration and everything. So these are connections that need to be made, and if you're missing things like prana in your ideology, and you're missing the subtle elements in your dream tonight, those aren't taught to you. Dreams are your figments of your imagination instead of consciousness moving to another location through the nadis with energy called prana, to a place where gods and gods exist, or ancestors exist. This is all missing, you see. Or if it's very confused when you try and put science and spirituality, or science and metaphysics, or science and religion together. There would be a composite of understanding if you put these together with open minds. But each one's standing out for its own level of understanding, and the missing ingredients that would coalesce all that would be acknowledgement of things like prana and consciousness moving in stations through inner nerves. That's blocked off to us. And just like it was blocked off to Mahachamasya, not to be able to go beyond this world. So how is he going to understand then, or people of that age, get beyond Svaha and get to Mahas, or Mahat, to where the illumined souls took their subtle bodies, you see. Just like you have a dream and you see your father or your mother or your ancestor, but now you're having a deeper experience in dream, and you're reaching a deeper level of consciousness, and you're having darshan with the seers or the saints, or with Krishna or Shiva or Ramakrishna, beings that you've meditated on your whole life. You're all of a sudden having a profound inner experience. These are attended by bliss and by elevated consciousness that makes you remember these experiences. It's not like the experiences in life where you would forget them a day later, or forget anything that happened to you after your 24-hour sleep period is over. You couldn't remember anything because it was all surface things that you experienced. But when consciousness penetrates to a deeper level of vibration and it has these experiences, it tends to remember them. And remembrance, of course, is half the battle in the war against ignorance. Because ignorance will just pretty much make you forget everything, even superficial things. And all the connections, the underpinnings that go with them. Like sometimes the Avadut sings about that when he sings Sadyadi kala rahitam nachamevi yogo yantaha prabodha rahitam nabadhiro mukha evam vikalparahitam nachabhava shudam gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham nirnatanatarahitam hi nirakulam vai nischita chitta vigatam Nirakulam vai samvidi sarva vigatam hi nirakulam vai gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham. So he sings very nicely about these worlds, because he's reached a level of non-dual understanding that has transcended all 7 worlds, or has put him into a high state of mind. He sings sunrise in the morning, sunset at dusk, but I see no real change taking place. Still, I am present to witness these variations. All is melted into a singular truth, undifferentiated. Yet I am not deaf or dumb. I am just free from ignorance. I am pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky and infinite like space. Again he sings, the creation of these many worlds is not for our benefit. How could they be when Brahman is beyond them, and we are that Brahman? It is the shameful mind that has vomited them out. Unity and diversity is not for us. It's not our nature. We are pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky and infinite like space. So it must have been something that he meditated upon in the terms of space, ether, sun, wisdom and intelligence. He must have saw the deeper meaning of the worlds. And then he would say the worlds are just a projection of mind. They mind vomited them out, you see, upchucked them. And while he remained the witness of all this, see, those words on sakshi are there in the Sanskrit. So, Gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham. Very beautiful statement that ends all 40 of those verses in the Avadhuta Gita. So that is a good way of concluding this chart. Now let's look at something else that comes up in terms of explaining the mind's tendency, which we know of these words as being sankalpa and vikalpa. So in this chart, we have another perspective very closely associated with what we've been talking about, but I think a little bit more explanatory, and at least until you warm up to the idea as vibration being of the mind. I mean, I suppose the best you could say was, when I went to deep sleep last night, I had no ego, and my mind stopped thinking. The buddhi stopped vibrating. Nothing was there. And I did that for 2, 3, 4 hours. Then I started dreaming, so something was there. And then I come to waking state, and here's all this, you see. So you're going in and out of these 3 states, which is, the beginning was the word, which is how India would, A-U-M, Om, would be these, assigned specifically these words, these worlds, these levels of consciousness as A, U, and M. So this would be the benefit of meditating on the word, which John did after Jesus passed away. And he remembered that saying, in the beginning was the word was with God, the word was God, and evidently he went into recluse state and meditated until he passed on the meaning that Christ meant about that, because he was there with Jesus, who was a knower of the word. And I would have to add to that so that we don't change us in the non-dual level of India's darshana, which they major at. They're supreme at explaining what's beyond the word. That I don't think many of the beings that followed up Jesus, like the church fathers, were either not very concerned with or didn't really interpret the idea of the word. They thought it meant origins. And India has always stood up for non-origination, ajati vada. Ajati means, no birth, no death. And nothing has a birth and death, not just you thinking, oh, I'm going to be born and I'm going to live and then I'm going to die, and that kind of concern, but all the objects around you and the worlds your mind projected and so forth also has no beginning, middle, and end. It's all unoriginated. And that's been the ultimate truth of India. And accompanied with that Jativada was a parinama. It also has no change. The change is apparent. So the mind that understands this is the best requisite, as the best requisite, is the best candidate for non-dual understanding, like the Abhitude's just singing about. Nobody else could sing like that about it. Not Mahachamasya couldn't sing about that at that time, because he was still busy penetrating through worlds, see. And he wanted to bring peace to the 3 worlds, but then he encountered the 4th world, and then, wow, this surprise, you see, surprise, surprise, here we go. We're entering different levels of consciousness, and the Taittiriya Upanishad pretty much left it at that point. But you're talking about beings that penetrated through all 7 worlds and arrived at no mind, or beyond even the subtlest or most causal vibrations of mind, which would produce worlds like Mahar, Jhana, Taparloka, and Satyaloka, what's sometimes called Brahmaloka. You'd have to reach the Trinity to understand the level of that kind of projection. The Mahat, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, their projection of things, which is very vast and beautiful and sattvic. So, under the auspice of all of this being a mental projection, from the Mahat down to the mind-born sons of Brahma, and down to the avatars of Vishnu, and the teachers of Shiva in Shaivism, all of that follows the idea of vibration, of God coming into form, and to reveal these origins for us. How we've fallen so far away from it in this day and age, because of our attraction to earth and all that, is a matter of root ignorance and disinterest, and the disappearance of higher wisdom, the disappearance of Dharma being taught in the world. All these causes can be cited for sure, but important thing is that we turn inward. You see, the kingdoms of heaven are within you, and inspect them. If you don't do it with the idea that it's all mind, doesn't matter, but you need to inspect the kingdom of heaven within you. And doing it through the vibration teaching, vrittis, is probably the best, or one of the best ways of doing that. So you could probably say that Lord Vashishta would be one of the greatest teachers of that path. And you can see here how he put it. There are 3 levels. Here's the 3 worlds again, as it were, because you see them on the side column there. The world itself, the mind, and then the intellect are the 3 levels in which he's talking about. If you were to look back on our chart or look over here, you'd probably see that the world means Bur, and the mind means probably the next 2 levels, Bur and Bhuvas Swaha, or Bhuva and Swaha, and then intellect starts to reach into a higher level of Mahat and Maharloka. But the problem is that there's a desire for them all, as if they were the end-all and be-all of existence. And so let's take the first quote by Vashishta. Sankalpa, again, remember, means imaginings in time. So you're projecting the worlds, you're getting into them, and you're dreaming in them. And then, of course, nobody sees them when they're shut off at the end of life, with your last breath, or in a deep meditation, or in deep sleep, or in samadhi. So he says, sankalpa, desire at 3 levels, the world, the mind, and the intellect, when utilized by the unillumined mind, is a detrimental force at the root of all suffering. So, but this very sankalpa, used by the illumined mind, is a different thing, he's inferring. So he goes on, this sankalpa is like a rutting elephant whose trunk is the tendency of selfish grasping, and who goes about spraying the world with the water of surface enjoyments. Only the sharp arrow of Atmagyan can bring this lumbering beast to its knees, so it can be bound by the ropes of masterful mind control. So he's teaching, guess who in this quote? He whose birthday is today, Sri Ram. As a teenager, Sri Ram heard these words from Lord Vashishta, who is King Dasaratha, who is Ram's father, had Vashishta as his main priest in the court, Kosala kingdom there. So this is all connections you can make too into the Leela-jan of religion. You know, the different plays that Ram and Sita went through, and that Radha and Krishna went through, and that Buddha went through, and that Christ went through, and so forth. These are all plays in consciousness. The projection was there, and they entered into it, and they worked with beings at different levels of that play, in the world, in the mind, and in the intellect. That is basically in these inner worlds. They worked with them. Like the Sufis nowadays, go to the sheikh, what was your dream? You know, so it's all about immediately leaving the world behind. They want to know what happened to you in the second level of your consciousness. And that's one of the bases of Sufi tradition. That is, there is a kind of superficial Sufism where, you know, you just dance, Sufi dances and so forth. But, you know, that's not going to take you very deep. You're going to have to take a teacher like a sheikh, and you're going to have to tell him your dreams, and you're going to have to meditate on Muhammad and take the teachings of Islam or Mohammedanism, and you're going to have to take that in, ingest it, and then see what your dreams turn up. See, so it's all a mind tasting, you see, of everything that's happening to you in life, once you've put it in the atmosphere of positive vrittis, holy vrittis, sacred vibrations. If you leave it in the level of gross vibrations, how do you expect to have any profound dreams, or any validating experiences, or anything profound happening to you whatsoever? And so you need to change the mind's location, you see, and make it dwell for a while on a deeper level of itself. Then it'll start offering up some of its jewels, like dive deep, O mind, dive deep into the ocean of God's beauty. If you descend to the uttermost depths, there you will find the gem of love. So songs of India are all talking about going deep into what? Dive deep, O mind, dive deep into the ocean of God's wisdom, His teachings. Where is that ocean? It's not going to the beach here in Hawaii. It's definitely not dipping into the ocean of suffering, which people do, but it's this ocean inside of you, which is an ocean of wisdom. And it's not the samsara sagara, it's the ananda sagara, or the ocean of bliss, the ocean of knowledge, the ocean of light. Where else are you going to find that but through your dreams, your deep sleep, and inward kingdoms of heaven that have been told to you by many seers of different traditions all along. So this is a good quote from Lord Vashishta's teachings to the young Sri Ram. We were saying about sankalpa on 3 levels is how he's putting it. Now let's look at the first level, the world, desire for physical objects. That means basically, and then I'm explaining this from shortening the stories that this came from. It's called Yoga Vashishta, the scripture, if you want to look into it. The desire for the world, for food, for sense objects, for pleasures, and for possessions. The seers also enjoy these things, but they don't have attachment for them. They're not coveting them, you see. And in fact, they're just using the higher aspects of those. They're using the higher aspects of food. They're using the higher, by making it pure and ingesting it and using the energy for practices. They're using the higher senses by purifying them and placing them inward on the subtle senses. They're using pleasure not for selfish purposes, but for exquisite pleasure. Vivekananda used to use those words. And also possessions they have. Not all of them, but some of them actually have possessions which they will share with others and gift to others. Depends on what mode of life they're living in. If they're ascetics in caves, of course, they'll lessen those possessions to a bare minimum, if any. But there are also beings who are householder yogis and great kings and so forth that are looking for the welfare of all beings. So they'll have to have some sort of commerce with this kind of level of things. So there again, you don't want to take the teaching as just a slap on the wrist kind of teaching, like in the terms of virtue and vice. You want to take it as he said in this first quote, the unillumined mind will use these as detrimental things. They'll fall into a problem with them. But the illumined mind will use them in a powerful way to move inside and to help others do the same. So that first world is there. Again, that's easy to align with Bur. Although this chart shows you that these kinds of things are being meditated on by rishis, not just examined by scientists, but they're being meditated on by luminaries. They see the sun as something marvelous. They see the earth as something marvelous, the waters as something wonderful, and those are inspiring their meditations. Like to go look for a long time, like the old cliche of watching the flower bloom. They'll sit for a long time just to see this Brahman in nature kind of thing going on. And so they'll have different experiences with these tattvas than intellectual people or secularized people or materialistic people or demonic beings will have with them. They'll try and covet and use them in a negative way. So that should be said, this division between the divine and the demoniacal, if you want, between the spiritual and the secular. And this war in the mind is constant going on between positive and negative. The second world then here, in terms of sankalpa, mental projection, is the mind. So you can see how all of this is following the mind-only school perspective, and how the kingdoms of heaven within, as we've been looking at in these first charts, are actually being outlined here. And mind itself, manas, comes to the fore for that. What is this desire for mental projection going on? Because it's for worlds, for heavens, for the excitements therein, and for the distractions that come. So this would be a good overall description of manas, or the dual mind, and how it projects the worlds, and the heavens are included in those worlds. And so how bhur, bhuva, swaha are going in back and forth in a transmigrating way. The soul is moving, like waking, dreaming, and deep sleep out here, is moving in and through these different worlds, and doing it to have the excitement of doing it, and distractions. I would say that those beings, as I've said before, their real addiction, sankalpic addiction, is prana in those three worlds, because they're using this life force and this energy without knowing that they're using it, or that it's using them, to project worlds and to enjoy them and to give them up and return. See, it's the path of returning, the dark path, the cloudy path that Krishna mentions in the Gita. So these fall all very nicely under the auspice and in the realm of the mind. It's desire for mental projection. It becomes a habit. And that habit is simultaneously put on hold and intensified here on earth. See, because they don't know about the prana, so they don't know what's driving them. At the same time, what's driving them reveals itself to them as objects and the pleasure they can get to them. See? So the pivotal place there would be a person who decided they'd had enough of objects and all of a sudden detached. So they would have to come to a level of discrimination between what changes and what stays the same, maybe by listening to a great seer or a guru, or finding a path. And at that pivotal point then, they could move back from and detach from what's driving them and see it. You see, they could actually witness it. If that witnessing is on a great level, and then it's a witness of the mind, you see, manaha kalpaha jagat, that sees that the mind has been engaging in these worlds, and that it's driven by excitements, distractions, and by a habitual occupation of bodies that are shifting through worlds. Those worlds are bhur, bhuva, swaha, as we saw. That's going on in the three worlds. That's why they say peace, peace, peace to them. See? If you're in that process, then we hope you seek and find peace. Because you could say in another way, what is driving the three worlds is rajas. Krishna says it in the Gita. I mean, there's plenty of chance for tamas to fall out of the three worlds to a lower state, because there are 7 lower worlds called bhumis, 7 lower hells, but then there are these 7 higher. So when you look at the three worlds, they're in the middle of these 14 sphere. And if you want to connect it to words again, there's a whole teaching that's given by Vashishta about the 14 levels of knowledge. So these are also the 14 worlds. So I mean, you can't really miss it if you see a teacher teach about it, or it's brought out to you in the Dharma teaching. Say, well, wait a minute, are those worlds or is that knowledge? So you can see how people are thinking that the two are not each other. They're distinct from one another, but that's not why they're giving teaching. They're giving both as worlds that came from knowledge. It all came from the mind's knowledge. Now, if you're using the knowledge for selfishness and petty things and so forth, then you're living in bhur pretty much only. If you begin to use it to build cloud castles in the sky, because there's a Sanskrit word for that, that whole saying came from Sanskrit, then you're beginning to use that to enjoy the process of going from heaven to earth. So you get addicted to that. It becomes a habit. It's a habit of rebirth. This is why Patanjali had to come along later, about 140 AD, at least in that incarnation, and put together the 8 limbs of yoga for you, and tell you about the 5 kleshas, which were called the 5 hells by Vedavyas, the father of Vedanta. So does that sound like when he calls egotism, attachment, aversion, clinging to life, and so forth? If he's calling those hells, then they're not just problems in your mind, they're worlds coming from words. So the kleshas, the 5 kleshas, you see. First was avidya, I was ignorant. So I didn't know anything. So I fell into the first hell. And then I had egotism take over, which is in the train of line of thinking of the 7 doorways of yoga, the 7 stages of negligence we looked at last week in the chart, negligence of Brahman, and also in Krishna's description in the Gita about the 7-fold road to ruination. It's listed in there in both of those systems. That all of these seers, from different religious approaches, you might say, or different traditions, or different darshanas, or different sampradayas, or different sects, are all saying the same thing at different periods of time. And they're saying it, they're reiterating it so you will see it lifetime to lifetime, and finally find the wherewithal to pull yourself up and out of it. Christ, if he hasn't come back for 2,000 years, he's probably thinking, why didn't you follow me when I was first there? Why didn't you do what I told you to do? If you didn't happen to be born at the time when I was on earth, then you heard it hopefully from your father and your mother later, a lifetime later, and you should have followed it, found it to be the truth, and freed yourself. Because 550 years before Jesus, Buddha was saying, be a lamp unto yourself. Don't depend upon me. You have to free yourself. So hundreds of these great, great, great beings have come, and they haven't made any change in the world. That's because the world is a projection of the mind that's in ignorance. So they only can make a change in the mind that is awake. And it's a rule of thumb for people who are entering into the level of trying to share Dharma with others, teachers, gurus, so forth. It's a rule of thumb that you understand that premise before you enter into it. See, beware those of you who enter here, as the saying goes. You see, because you're entering into the world of bur, of physical things, and the desires for them. So that pretty much hits the nail on the head when you come to the second world there. It is the mind. And it wasn't that the world wasn't the mind, it's just that you're going to a deeper level of sankalpa, you see. If you go to the deepest level of sankalpa, which would maybe be correlative with svaha or svar, then you're talking about the intellect. And there it gets desire for attainments. There you're finding people who maybe don't have so much. I mean, you see them all the time. I'm not that hungry, you see. I want to paint. I'm not going to give up playing my instrument to go get food. Or I'm not going to give thinking about mathematical formulas, or I don't want to eat, I just want this. So they're after intellectual attainments, and food, sense objects, and pleasure doesn't interest them that much anymore. Those are some cases that we can cite. And they're probably not sitting around thinking, I want heaven or I want the world. They want attainment from what they're doing in the world. So they're less deluded in some ways and more deluded in others. Because the further you go into the intellect, without acknowledging the mother of the intellect, Chit Shakti, they call her, the power in thought, then the more dangerous your intellectual attainments become to you. Like splitting the atom. That's an intellectual attainment, isn't it? They quoted the Gita. One of the scientists quoted the Gita when the first atom bomb went off. Quoted Krishna, I am the destroyer of worlds. He knew that much from the Gita to say that. But he wasn't there to stop it. And, and everything that would happen after that, like Hiroshima and so forth, and up to the warlike kingdoms of today. See, the kings of heaven that are outside, and what they're doing. So basically, the intellect and the desire for attainments is a subtler level, but it's also a more dangerous one. If you were to refer back to old times, you'd find out that that's pretty much where Indra, the god of gods, and the gods and goddesses and the celestial musicians, who really love attainment musically, and the apsaras, who really love pleasure, intricate pleasure, that's where they reside. Okay, so if you're, there's a danger of you falling out of this back to earth after Sri Ramakrishna, to quote Sri Ramakrishna, after, or actually to quote Holy Mother, after the good merits of your past birth are expired. Then you'll fall back into, to get more good merit to take you to him again. So you can look at it in the old way or in the more contemporary way of probably not knowing it, but at least considering it, or like I like to say, entertaining the idea, because that's where contemplation and manana would start. Well, let's read the rest of it. What is the desire for attainments? For power, for manipulation, for pride, and for glory. Those are some nice words to put in there. I could think of a few more too. I mean, that glory really means for accolades from your other cohorts. The scientist wants to be recognized in physics, and the doctor in medicine, and the lawyer in law, and so forth. They're in that particular intellectual realm, and they want to find the newest cure for cancer. They want to find some cure for injustice. Good luck with that, and so forth and so on. So they're into it for those levels, and that particular train of thought is overtaking them lifetime to lifetime, which is why you'll probably be born in a series of lawyers or doctors if you're taking reincarnation in the West and so forth, in the modern West. So what you learned before, you can use again. And that's true with all secular subjects, and Paravidya and Paravidya and so forth, as we will see here in a minute. Everything that falls inside of the many worlds. But for now, it's something that needs to be inspected by you, so that the ego can learn not to be to take credit for things that belong to higher powers. If you can't get by Indra in the third world to go beyond the realm of the gods and goddesses, then this desire for power will send you back to earth. The beings who came back as Hitlers and Napoleons and Alexander the Greats and the different run of beings that are into power and wanting to dominate the worlds were probably straight out of the third loka, and they weren't satisfied. They didn't get peace. They didn't get the desire to come down and unite people. They got the desire to come down and separate them and dominate over them. It would be the difference between a Maharishi, you see, and a military leader, see, like a Mahatma. When we say the word Mahatma, who do we think about right away? Gandhi. See? So he was a lawyer, but he was concerned for uniting people, for making their life better. But the beings who went to Indraloka and had to come back because they wanted more desire for power, they wanted to come back to lord, dominate. It's one of the occult powers, to lord and dominate over people. So the 8 occult powers are there in people who want to do sensational, miraculous things. And they can be in the realm of the imaginary and impossible, or they can be in the realm of the possible but deluded. So the ego has to learn to hands off, this, and put the Atman back on the throne, because it kicked the Atman off the throne and usurped it for its own selfishness, as long as it was in the three worlds. So we say peace, peace, peace unto the beings who are in those worlds, so that they can, like Mahajamasya, espy something that's deeper and more profound and more beneficial for themselves and for others. And that's going to be the turn, as we know, called love. It takes you out of the third realm into the fourth realm, where you won't have to reincarnate anymore in the first three worlds. It was set up very nicely and explained very intricately in words that were poetic and full of inspiration and praise, the Upanishads say, by these rishis who were at least at the Maharloka and beyond. They had transcended the need to come back for the worlds, for the mind, or for the intellect, for physical objects, for mental projections, or for attainments. They got beyond it. They got over it. See? And they were just happy to be in peace, peace, peace. And then they would either give up all forms and not be reborn again, or be reborn to help others. Basically, Jivan Muktas, also called Bodhisattvas, or Videha Muktis, are the two terms we find in Sanskrit. So I had some fun with this myself, this teaching from Lord Vashishta to Sri Ram, and put it in this way. So many words I could think of in English that were mental modes of sankalpa. Hope would be one of them. Vivekananda said, it's my least favorite quality. If you have to rely on hope, then it means you've fallen so low. You see, you really should be saying, I am that Brahman, but you're hoping for something, maybe even hoping to be Brahman, which isn't quite so low as hoping for the worlds or for mental attainments and so forth. But it's not very high either, so you've fallen into hope, then there you have it. Brooding, we know how that can be a waste of time. And why is it? Probably pretty much because of distractions. Then there's seeking. Like Holy Mother used to say, don't seek God, see God. God is in your very self. Don't seek God, see God. So seeking can have a downside to it. Sincere seeking, of course, will move you forward, your game forward, your chess piece, you see, to a more profound position where you might be able to get some witness consciousness. But in the meantime, it can also become a detriment because you're looking for something you already are, and that can drive you away from the knowledge that you're that. Like being a professional student can keep you from getting a degree, kind of thing. You see, put it on that level. Then there's owning, coveting, enjoying, striving, accumulating, clinging, not sharing, taking the unreal to be the real, conceiving, thinking, imagining, creating, projecting, and fantasizing. These are all words in English that would carry a slightly different connotation, but nevertheless could easily be put under the heading of sankalpa and vikalpa. Sankalpa means, my mind projected something out of desire and then went to enjoy it. And I forgot that I was the one that projected it, basically. It's like what we've done here. Created these worlds with the mind, forgot that the mind did it. Now we're blaming it on God or devil or some other impossible thing, you see. But it was all our responsibility. It was all our doing. It was the mind that vomited them out, you see. And it wasn't God who did that, nor wasn't the poor devil. He's been blamed for everything except just not worshiping man when God produced him. His name was Iblis at that time, you see, in the Islam religion. Iblis was shown mankind, God's newest creation, and God said, bow down to him, he's my new creation, and Iblis wouldn't, so it became the devil. See? That's how Sufism, Islam explains that. And a better philosophical basis to understand the devil than you get in Christendom or so forth. So I was in the midst of saying sankalpa is that projection, but vikalpa means more out of desire, you see. So you can see how these words are pretty much the same thing, but have a slightly different connotation again. Now let's take this last teaching of Vashishta to Sri Ram, whose birthday it is today again, Ramchandra. He says, for mastery over sankalpa and vikalpa, practice asamvedana. Now, a chart I put together was the 7 types of desire. And it came out of those sentences of Vashishta, because I wanted to show people how desire manifests and how there were at least 3 or 4 of those forms of desire that you cannot solve through ordinary means. But there are 3 higher forms of desire which you can get beyond your desire for things if you use them. Asamvedana was one of those. It really means non-receptivity to desire. So you have to take desire and say, it's got a hold of me, and then turn your nose up to it, you see. Turn your mind away from it. You have to do this as a practice. I am not averse to desire, because then it could come forward more angry and more forceful on you. But actually just decide not to see it, not to be subject to it. So this is how Vashishta, it says, is one of the highest, probably the highest of these 7 forms of desire, of dealing with desire, is asamvedana, if you can do it. Instead of falling in love with your own desires as if they were fulfilling, you must instead begin to perceive them as burdens. So you get tired of carrying that weight. They're like packages and parcels filled with unwanted items that really clutter your life and only weigh you down. I think the story in the tradition was how a man arrives, in a probably at that time in some sort of a conveyance, bullock cart or something, and drops him off at the byway station and takes all his stuff out of the wagon and sits there. He happens to get there at midnight, so he's got all these possessions at midnight. He can't leave them because there are dacoits. You know what dacoits are? A nice Indian word for you. So there's these thieves out there probably looking at him and saying, how am I going to get his possessions, you see? So he can't leave the possessions to go away and call someone to come, to visit someone and say, bring me back, come and pick me up, you see. So he's stuck there with these possessions. They're burdens. And he can neither leave them nor give them up, you see. So he's stuck in that condition of attachment. And so mentally then, these are your objects, you see. And these worlds are the place where you've been dropped off. And you are the soul that's coveting these very things that are binding you down. So you might want to hear about that very strange but beautiful word in Sanskrit, asamvedana. It sounds awesome, doesn't it? But asamvedana. So it means just non-receptivity to the desires that come upon you. You may have to practice it first in stages like detachment. There's 12 levels of detachment. First, you might have to really resist the thing that you know is not good for you, but which you have a habit to. And that would be going against the general grain of people who are flowing into the ocean of samsara with the expressed desire to own, to enjoy, to covet, to steal, to fight about, all these here, see, all of these. And you might want to then probably get over your attachment to them. And as long as we're talking about that in terms of Ram's birthday, then maybe we should sing about what it would mean in terms of Sri Ram's understanding, because Vashishta is giving him this teaching. There is kind of something I put together, a collage of the 2 beings, this young teenage Ram, who's the light of everyone's life, in the Kosala kingdom, and Vashishta, the great Horial priest, that's his father's main Brahmin priest in the courtyard, trying to tell him about these various things. And you can see Ram is contemplating them in his mind, you see where it all happened. They used to say that about Vivekananda, that he walked around, Sri Ramakrishna, he said, with his hair tousled and his clothes disarrayed, and his eyes always had this far away look, like he was contemplating something, but he wasn't seeing space and trees. Oh, look at the beautiful trees, or birds, or this and that. You know, he was like seeing the knowledge in his own head and making the connection between the outer grass and the inner grass, the outer tree and the inner tree, the outer guru and the inner guru. And all these things were what he was contemplating in his mind, by the mind, through the mind. And so he was living in that ability to go beyond mind and its various impediments, obstacles, attachments, and so forth. So, I mean, and then Tulsidas would sing about that by saying, Itani vinati raghunandana se dukkha dandva hamara bitauji. Itani vinati raghunandana se dukkha dandva hamara bitauji. Dukkha dvandva hamara bitauji. Dukkha dvandva hamara bitauji. Dukkha dvandva hamara bitauji. Dukkha dvandva hamara bitauji. Itani vinati raghunandana se. This is my prayer to thee, O Raghunanda. So what was the prayer to thee, Ram, which Tulsidas was singing about here so beautifully? He says, kindly destroy my mind's tendency to perceive duality. He says, O Ram, I have a prayer for thee. Kindly destroy my mind's tendency to perceive duality. What does it sound like?
Asamvedana.
There you are. The word we just took up. It's asamvedana. He doesn't want to be receptive to the desires anymore. Just destroy that tendency, you see. So it's not like, oh, take me from non-duality to qualified non-dualism to non-duality. That will happen along the way. He just wants the root of the thing gone, and he will be in non-duality. Because why? He was never anywhere else than in non-duality. The worlds did never exist. The mind spewed them out. So he's read about that and heard about that. Now he wants to experience it. And like most of us impetuous souls, we want it quick. See, once we hear of it, give it to us quick, you see. And the desire for liberation quick is different than the worldly soul's desire for attainments, see, even if they're spiritual. Because we know many people are coming now to the gurus and thinking that maybe enlightenment's some commodity that they can buy or purchase or can get bestowed upon them through some sort of sleight of hand, some sort of miracle and so forth. But they're finding out that that's not the way, so they quit the path and go away. And they made a false start at it. Patanjali calls that a real problem in your next lifetime. If you approach something that's worthy like that and give it up because you couldn't attain it, and probably the whole thing was a false approach in the first place, you see. You wanted it for the wrong reasons. So then it comes anavasti tattvani. You're trying to make one step forward, but you're falling 2 steps back. Father of yoga had this all mapped out in his yoga system. The 8 limb, the Patanjala it's called. There's no more complex, deep system of practice and attainment than yoga, than Patanjala's Raja Yoga. Except maybe Tantra, and Tantra was never systematized. We have the father of yoga, he's affectionately known as, in his lifetime at about 140 AD, to thank. Thank is, of course, a very mild word for it, but to have huge appreciation and gratitude for that he brought together this immense system with all of its trappings. And We have some 112 lessons on it that you can take in SRV if you want to write to us. Start taking the Raja Yoga lessons. Learn it from the ground up. It might take you a couple years depending on how quick a study you are, but you'll get everything there from Patanjali's offering with Vedavyasa's commentary and Swami Yogananda's guidance. Swami Vivekananda's guidance. Swami Yogananda was one of the other disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. So you'll get all of this in that study, and then you can say, in this lifetime, I took in all the teachings, the Dharma teachings of true yoga. See? And therefore qualified myself for that, which will be the death of Sankalpa. This is how you're going to get rid of your desires for lesser things, to learn yoga, because yoga is union with God for one thing, and as a practice it takes these things all away from you. The kleshas, the antaryayas, and even studying the first 5 yamas and niyamas will probably be a teaching that will take you away from this kind of low, mean pursuits that people get sucked into. So we have about 10 minutes left. We've reached the end of this chart, and I guess, that's always a quandary I have timing-wise. Should we take up another major chart? But then I've kind of solved the dilemma by saying we could always introduce it and continue it on in the 3rd class next week, Sunday at the same time. And because this is a very powerful chart, para and aparavidya, I would say there's another level of it called avidya. And that's how I've extended the twofold teaching into 3. But you can see here this beautiful sort of cloud castle of its own, a cloud cathedral in the sky that I had a visual artist make for us, collage style. It's one of the covers of one of our earlier issues of Nectar of Non-Dual Truth, which is our magazine that SRV puts out. So the subtitle there, The Clarifying Teaching of Higher and Lower Knowledge. The teaching is given out because when we entertain or attain to higher knowledge, we don't necessarily feel that we need to give up lower knowledge. We're going to need it. And so if you're, in fact, next week or the week after, I'll show you the 10 pure lands of Buddhism, the Dasa Bhumikas, because it shows how after you have transcended maybe even these lower worlds of manifestation that the mind projects, then you have illumined mind and what it can project. So you have these 10 pure lands that they've turned into a system in Buddhism. Very beautiful teachings, and what the soul is contemplating there looks entirely different than this. If you put those two, I've never thought of it, but if you put those two charts next to each other, the 10 pure lands and this, what people covet here, as the Katha Upanishad says, then you will see what a vast difference there are between illumined souls seeking, if you want to use that, and the seeking of worldly people, or people who are destined to suffer because of wrong seeking, wrong approaches. So the higher knowledge and lower knowledge are both good things. Right now, as I mentioned in the first half, my teacher's saying you must go beyond the intellectual perspective if you're a Westerner, scientist, a doctor, and so forth. You must go beyond the intellectual perspective of things to get jivan mukta, that is, become a living, liberated soul. You must penetrate a sort of barrier that's there, again, which we were just talking about the ego's arrogance and its desire to attain things and cling to them. That would be this 3rd world. So it's a very profound teaching, actually, the teaching of Svaha, Bhur, Bhuva, Svaha, or Svar Loka, that comes here along with it, the chart in conjunction with the chart we just had, that what happens in that 3rd world, both with people who are power mongers and warmongers and people who are seeking glory, pride, and through pride. They want to be recognized. And this is all ego activity which brings them plummeting back down to earth to enjoy or suffer, or both, more of the same. So it's a very kind of hidden teaching that comes out when you entertain, as I like to say, or consider the three worlds, or that these are the kings of heaven within the mind. Because the mind is involved in all of this, you might as well just admit it, that it's the mind that's bringing people, dragging them from birth to death and death to birth. And we know mind in India has a wider connotation. Mind means mind with intellect, mind with ego, mind with thought. Those four things are called antaha karana, the fourfold mind. And if you add the mahat, the great mind, with it, you've got another quintuplication there. But the fourfold mind is always engaged in this sankalpa. And so if you were to look at the fourfold mind and purify each one of those, like you once purified the five senses, or you once purified the five elements of the body with fasting and pure foods and everything, you're just doing a purification of all the mind's facets from outer to inner. And at one level you'd find a guru and take a mantra, and that would purify your body and begin to purify your ignorance around words and what they mean. I mean, the whole thing plays into this very profoundly. Maybe we can take Valmiki's first quote here in the time we have left, and then segue next week into this chart as the first thing we'll take up. He says, lower knowledge taken from books and conventional religious knowledge gleaned from ordinary scriptures form two separate hells for beings devoid of higher wisdom. They don't constitute hells for beings with higher wisdom. Let's put it that way, put it in a more positive way. He goes on, even intelligent beings writhe in these two states, fixating on wealth, status, and power. Right from this chart. Therefore, you should exert inwardly and swiftly to attain transcendent wisdom, taking refuge only in the great self. More along the lines of this ego having to be ripened or taken out of the picture or lessened so that the light can get through to it. So that quote alone is a mouthful out of Valmiki. Now, Valmiki, we know, that one of those great seers and rishis, which we hear beautiful stories about too, who inhabited the higher worlds and took a subtle body and came back to help other beings. Great souls, names who start with V. Vashishta, Vishvamitra, Valmiki. They were all friends and sometimes enemies in certain lifetimes. I know that Vashishta didn't get along very well with Vishvamitra at one point. They had some disagreements, but they both got together and helped Ram out of his quandary about Maya in that particular age, back in the Treta Yuga. So we were just singing about that, you see. And that would be a good way to end this class, to refrain. Itani vinasi raghunandana se dukadandva hamara bitauji 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 Itani vinati raghunandana se Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamoya Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamoya Abhira Mayidi Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from lower truth to higher truth. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from the unreal to the real. And lead us from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.